What if a single speech could ignite a political storm powerful enough to reshape the future of Europe? Imagine the atmosphere in a crowded studio, where the German chancellor steps up and delivers a message so sharp it cuts through decades of diplomatic caution. Friedrich Merz didn't hold back. In a recent German television interview, he called Vladimir Putin potentially one of the gravest war criminals of our era, a declaration that sent ripples far beyond the studio walls. This wasn't mere posturing, it was a strategic shock aimed at ending the deadly conflict in Ukraine by any means necessary. Merz unveiled a tough new plan: the West must deliberately weaken Russia's economy to cripple its ability to wage war. This harsh approach marks an open call for sustained economic pressure, not just political debate. Yet, as bold as it sounds, the real question lies beneath: can the world absorb such a gamble without spiraling deeper into chaos? Moscow reacted swiftly and sharply. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov dismissed Merz's remarks as unwelcome and irrelevant amid current tensions. His words were a familiar diplomatic shield, but one that also exposed how such heated public exchanges threatened to sabotage any peaceful dialogue. Meanwhile, Maria Zakharova, Russia's foreign ministry spokeswoman, responded with biting sarcasm, mocking the idea that Russia could be easily drained. Her remarks rapidly spread across Russian social networks, sparking intense debate within the country's media. This was more than rebuttal, it was a way to flip the narrative, highlighting weaknesses among those pushing for sanctions. But the storm doesn't end here. Across Europe, political voices started to question Merz's rhetoric. Some, like Florian Philippe, leader of the French Patriots Party, called his outburst madness, a provocation that risks dragging the West into highly dangerous waters. Inside Germany itself, frustration is simmering. Can a leader who prizes hard talk maintain unity at home, especially when soaring energy costs and a slowing economy are already straining its people? These sharp words have shaken political alliances and rattled business circles worried about the fallout from broken trade relations. This tense moment reveals a profound fracture within Europe's soul, a battle between boldness and pragmatism, between pushing a foe to the brink and preserving fragile stability. In this high-stakes chess game, every phrase, every accusation, carries weighty consequences. Is Friedrich Merz's gamble one of leadership, or reckless brinkmanship? The answer might change the course of an entire continent. In the dynamic landscape of international relations, the recent comments from Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova struck a chord, igniting a wave of discourse across social media and news outlets. Her sarcastic dismissal of the notion to exhaust Russia as unrealistic reflects a broader strategic maneuver. This response highlights the vulnerabilities of those advocating for sanctions, underscoring a growing divergence of opinions among European leaders concerning the escalating rhetoric surrounding Russia. Even influential European politicians have begun to take note of this discourse's extreme nature. Florian Philippot, a leader of the French Patriots Party, characterized Chancellor Merz's remarks as bordering on madness, perceiving them as deliberate provocations that could risk serious repercussions for the West. This reaction indicates a fracturing consensus within Europe about future strategic directions. Simultaneously, an intriguing contrast emerges as diplomatic and economic ties strengthen between Moscow and Beijing. In early September 2025, China announced a trial visa-free regime for Russian citizens, a gesture that the Russian president acknowledged with gratitude. While voices call for exhausting Russia, real actions are fostering deeper economic and cultural connections, creating a stark juxtaposition between aggressive rhetoric and cooperative practice. As these developments transpired, large-scale military exercises known as Quadriga 2025 unfolded in the Baltic Sea. Approximately 8,000 Allied soldiers from over 10 nations participated, signaling readiness for collective defense but also adding another layer to the already complex narrative. The seeming contradiction raises the question, why did Merz choose this moment for such emphatic statements? In protracted conflicts, leaders often seek to convey determination to their constituents, especially in light of surging domestic economic and political pressures. Furthermore, this rhetoric serves an external purpose, signaling Germany's commitment not only to agreements but also to firm action. The stakes are high, and the delicate balance between dialogue and aggression could tip at any moment. What unforeseen consequences lie ahead in this intricate web of diplomacy? As the global landscape shifts, it remains to be seen how these pronouncements will ripple through alliances and affect future negotiations. The narrative is only beginning to unfold, and each word has the potential to either fortify or fracture alliances. In recent times, the statements made by the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz have raised eyebrows across the globe. The ongoing conflict has prompted leaders to project strength to their constituents, especially as domestic economic and political pressures rise. But why was Merz's rhetoric positioned so sharply against Russia at this juncture? It appears that these stark declarations are not only aimed at rallying support within Germany, but also at sending a signal of resolve to allies, especially to Ukraine. He is essentially declaring Germany's readiness to not just commit papers, but to enforce tough measures as well. However, there's a catch. Such public statements, while intended to exert pressure in negotiations, may escalate tensions rather than resolve them. Consequences loom large. The German leadership risks its reputation. Harsh rhetoric can backfire diplomatically, diminishing Berlin's stature as a mediator. Moreover, escalating tensions increases the possibility of retaliatory actions from the targeted parties, casting doubt on any future negotiations. Within Europe itself, these declarations lead to discussions about the limits of acceptable pressure versus the need for stability. As events unfold, Merz's aggressive language elicits varied reactions, drawing official condemnation from Moscow and dissatisfaction from some of his European peers. In September 2025, it's evident there's a growing divide between what is said and done. In some areas, cooperative pathways expand, while in others, rhetoric intensifies, hinting at a possible escalation of conflict. This contentious episode is merely the tip of the iceberg, revealing deeper fractures within Europe, one that challenges the very notion of unity. The situation in Germany showcases how, while Merz gestures with soaring, combative rhetoric on the international stage, discontent simmers within his own country regarding his strategies. Amid rising energy prices and industrial slowdowns, voters are questioning the rationale of draining resources to exhaust an external adversary. For many, such calls for toughness come across not only as alarming but also as cynical. The backlash is palpable in the business community, where warnings about the economic fallout from severed trade ties are growing louder. Companies are now facing billion-dollar losses and the erosion of markets years in the making. How long can this discontent fester before it disrupts the political landscape? The sound of dissent resonates amid the ruling coalition, with increasing disagreements over strategy concerning Russia. Criticism of the chancellor emerges not just from opponents but also from within his coalition, raising the specter of domestic instability. Meanwhile, reactions from other European capitals suggest that Merz's position is far from universally accepted, voices calling for a re-evaluation of approaches grow louder. In stark contrast, as Europe grapples with its internal divides, Moscow appears serene, concentrating on practical steps to fortify its ties with partners like China, who recently announced a visa-free regime for Russian citizens. These moves illustrate that Moscow is actively seeking alternatives, underscoring the increasingly complex geopolitical reality. As the stage is set for further developments, one pressing question lingers: will Merz's bravado ultimately leave Germany more isolated within Europe than ever, or will it rally the continent toward a precarious path fraught with new tensions? As tensions escalate across Europe, a troubling undercurrent runs through Germany's leadership. Recent public opinion polls reveal a significant decline in Chancellor Friedrich Merz's approval ratings, mirroring the growing unease among the populace. Citizens struggle to comprehend the rationale behind funneling limited resources towards external confrontations when domestic energy prices soar and industries face stagnation. Economic pressures mount like a thick fog, turning calls for aggressive foreign strategies into a bitter pill that many voters find hard to swallow. Within the business community, responses have been particularly severe. Industry leaders from various sectors have raised alarming concerns about the financial fallout from trade disruptions and sanctions. Countless companies are now facing billion-dollar losses and the devastation of markets cultivated over decades. These aren't just statistics, these are real contracts slipping away, jobs hanging in the balance, and investments fading into uncertainty. The political turmoil isn't confined to external criticism. Within the governing coalition itself, fractures are becoming apparent as members voice dissenting opinions regarding strategies toward Russia. Criticism of Merz originates not only from opposition parties but also from his own allies. This internal strife raises the specter of political instability, further compromising Germany's position on the international stage. Meanwhile, responses from other European capitals highlight the divisive nature of Merz's stance. Florian Philippot, the leader of the French Patriots Party, labeled the Chancellor's conduct as bizarre, sparking discourse on the merits of re-evaluating Europe's aggressive tone. Calls for a more pragmatic approach to conflict resolution grow ever stronger, even in nations with long-standing anti-Russian sentiments. Notably, Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico openly offered to mediate, urging all parties to seek compromise. So, what does this mean for Europe's future? As the chasm between rhetoric and reality widens, will leaders reconsider their paths, or will the escalations continue unchecked? Previously, we saw growing calls across Europe to rethink the current path and explore more practical ways to resolve the ongoing conflict. Even in countries long known for strong anti-Russian sentiments, voices like Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico have emerged, openly offering to mediate and urging negotiation. This shift reveals a continent weary from enduring tensions on its doorstep. But how does Moscow respond to this changing European mood? Instead of fiery public condemnations, the Kremlin is showing remarkable restraint. It is focusing on tangible moves to diversify its external relations. For instance, China's recent decision to trial visa-free entry for Russian citizens is not just a diplomatic gesture. For Moscow, it is a lifeline, an opening into broader economic and cultural integration. This step confirms that Russia doesn't rely solely on European markets anymore. It strengthens its bargaining position significantly. Now, consider the heavy-handed rhetoric of Michael Friedrich Merz. Intended to project strength, his harsh words threaten to backfire spectacularly. Far from solidifying Germany's authority, they inflame divisions within Europe itself. German business circles face real damage, with contracts lost and markets shrinking after years of growth. Politically, Merz's tough stance causes friction in Berlin's governing coalition and risks alienating European allies. By September 2025, the gap between grand declarations and practical realities becomes glaring. One must ask, where is this path leading? Yet amidst this turmoil, Russia's economic ties with China surge ahead at record pace. Their cooperation now stretches far beyond raw material trade. Joint ventures span industry, cutting-edge technology, transportation infrastructure, and energy sectors. They even deepen connections in culture and education. And China is far from Russia's only partner. Moscow steadily strengthens relationships with India and expands its influence across the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. At every turn, business, science, and cultural ties grow firmer. The paradox is striking. The louder the West calls for isolation, the closer Russia binds itself to much of the rest of the world, representing an overwhelming majority of humanity. Now picture this: across the Baltic Sea, NATO organizes the Quadriga military drills. Thousands of troops from more than 10 allied nations take part. Officially, these exercises showcase readiness to deter aggression. On paper, it looks formidable. But beneath the surface, the reality is far less impressive. What does this display really signal? Could it be blowing a trumpet that no longer inspires the fear it once did? And what risks hide behind the show of force? In a world increasingly torn apart by conflicts, there lies a paradox where the louder the cries of isolation are heard from the West, the closer Moscow draws to the rest of the global community. This rest of the world comprises a significant majority of humanity. Now, let's turn our attention to what NATO refers to as a show of strength. Military exercises named Quadriga are currently underway in the Baltic Sea. Thousands of soldiers from over 10 allied nations are participating. On the official front, these exercises are promoted as measures to deter aggression, which sounds impressive on paper. But the reality is far less glamorous. Such displays have long ceased to yield the desired effects. Increasingly, they are perceived not as symbols of power but as signs of political anxiety. Moscow's response has been remarkably composed. There are no hysterics, threats, or panic, just a dry acknowledgement of facts, coupled with reminders of the serious repercussions any escalation could invite. This calm demeanor is likely the last thing the organizers of the exercises anticipated. Now, we arrive at the pivotal question: what's next? Chancellor Friedrich Merz seemingly hoped that his hardline rhetoric would bolster his position both domestically and in the eyes of allies. However, the outcome has been the opposite. His performance has drawn sharp criticism from all quarters, including coalition partners and neighboring leaders, effectively costing him the political initiative. Merz finds himself at a crossroads. To step back would mean admitting fault, while pressing on could irreparably damage his credibility and plunge Germany into an even deeper crisis. Europe as a whole shares a similar predicament. The path of confrontation may continue, yet one must acknowledge that it leads to a dead end. The alternative is a more flexible approach grounded in dialogue and compromise. Thus far, such signs are scant, but history teaches us that when political survival is at stake, leaders can dramatically shift their courses. As for Merz, his future appears exceedingly uncertain. A chancellor unable to maintain unity within his own coalition and who breeds irritation among allies is unlikely to stay in power for long. The tides of politics may turn as swiftly as the winds in the Baltic, enveloping all in their tumult. But are the leaders ready for the storm that lies ahead? Previously, we saw how political survival forces leaders to sharply shift direction. Chancellor Merz faces a future shrouded in uncertainty. Unable to maintain unity within his coalition and alienating allies, his grip on power grows ever weaker. Now, the irony hits hard. His loud calls to drain Russia's strength, meant to showcase decisive might, have become a desperate bid to rescue a sinking career. Instead of projecting power, Merz ended up exposing his political fragility. What was intended as a display of international leadership turned into an open sign of vulnerability. This is a harsh lesson, not only for Merz himself but for many European politicians who rely solely on tough rhetoric while overlooking the fallout. Can relentless toughness really win the day, or does it risk leading to ruin? The stark contrast between words and reality forces a deeper reckoning. Will European leaders learn to balance strength with prudence, or will they stumble further into division and crisis? Only time will reveal who can grasp this crucial truth, and who will remain trapped by their own harsh words.